Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching later, if this is later. I'm Annabelle Howard, co-founder of Big Fun Education, and you're watching a Common Core conversation. And I'm going to hand over to my partner, Forrest Stone, to describe what we mean by that. Forrest?
Hi, my name is Forrest Stone, as Annabelle just said, and I'm co-founder of Big Fun Education, which is a nonprofit dedicated to memorable learning. In the interest of full disclosure, I'll add that Annabelle and I are married. So we are literally a mom and pop. The Common Core conversation is our response, Big Fun's response, to the conversation that has been going on around the Common Core, which tends to be about controversy, conflict, and confusion. And what we're trying to do is just to take a positive attitude and try to figure out the kinds of guests we can have joining us in this conversation that might yield positive, practical, supportive things that can help teachers, administrators, parents, and kids get along with their education while some of these other aspects, the controversies and the policy issues play themselves out. Because this school year has already started and it'll never happen again. Those kids who are in third grade this year, most of them will never be in third grade again. So let's try to make it good for them right now. That's our goal here.
Great, I like that. So let's get right down to it and just do a lightning round of who we are. You'll find out who we are as we go through, but just basically you can hear I'm from England. I now live in America. I've taught in 3 countries, and I'm a writer essentially. But I love teaching. I love teachers. I love kids. So this is the next best thing to being in the classroom for me. I do love the classroom. So I'm going to hand you to our special guest here today, and Mike's going to speak for himself.
All right. My name's Mike Fisher. I am an educational consultant, instructional coach. I work around the country with the Common Core standards, both in alignment and in curriculum design. I do a lot with instructional technology as well, and the immersion of just 21st century learning into the classroom and making sure that we're preparing our students for right now and what those right now skills are going to be. So, and I appreciate being invited to share my stance with you today.
I love that, the right now skills. That's fabulous. So Forrest, do you want to just give a quick background to yourself?
Sure.
Married to me, which I know is a big deal, but
well, that's number 1 on the resume right there. I'm also essentially a writer. I'm a graduate of the Yale School of Drama, and shortly after graduating, Annabelle and I started our first company in education, and so throughout my career, I've worked at Scholastic and created Scholastic StoryWorks magazine, I'm a reader, and many other roles in educational media and publishing. And throughout, what I've tried to do is to bring entertainment and fun and engagement to educational projects and products for 30 years now. So that's me.
Okay, that's fair enough. Okay, so on with the real reason for the show, and that is to test Mike. Right? The Common Core is all about testing. No, it's not.
Well, that's why people are mad about that's the interpretation that gets people angry.
That's right. That's right. So nobody likes that. You know, the minute you say, right, I'm going to test you, it's such a turn-off. You probably know everything, but the minute I say that, it's like you've forgotten half of it already. So, however, we are going to sort of test you, Mike. I'd like to do a screen share now of the standard that we're talking about. Mike has written an entire book about close reading, and so you can imagine how much he knows about this. So I think it's a fair test. Let's see if I can screen share the actual mention of it in the Common Core, and perhaps you can give us a close reading. Do you see that?
Yes, I've got it.
Great. Okay, Mike, would you like to give us a close reading of this standard?
So, first of all, I want to explain that close reading is about rereading, and rereading for the sake of understanding meaning or purpose. And when we look at this particular standard, the very first thing that we need to notice is this is not a grade-specific standard. The coding across the top tells me with the CCRA that this is a reading anchor standard. And the anchor standards are the umbrella over all of the other standards. They're a K-12 version of the standard, and each of the grade-specific standards drills into the skills that a kid would have to know and be able to do over the course of their career in school, kindergarten through 12th grade. All of them relate back to this particular anchor. And this one, you can see what it says on the page, starts with read closely. And that term, as it happens, does not appear again in the Common Core. This is the only place it's found. But because it's an anchor standard, must be pretty important, right? Vendors and curriculum designers and a lot of people have taken that phrase, read closely, as sort of the new mantra in education, but that's not really what this standard is about. One of the things that I'm noticing is that you chose to embolden the words determine, make, cite, and support. If I was to have had control over the bolding process, I probably would have done it by phrase versus word, but the verbs here are extremely important because they tell us what the skills are. If we just tell kids to read closely, what does that mean, and what degree of variability does that have in our interpretation of that phrase? What's easier to interpret and converse about is what follows those words, including determining what the text says explicitly, make logical inferences from it, cite specific textual evidence, and support conclusions drawn from the text. Those four things are the skills that represent what reading closely actually is. I also noticed that you put a magnifying glass there. One of the things that I talk to teachers about is how read closely is not really a skill in and of itself. It's a lens. It's a magnifier of what happens when we engage these four skills, this suite of skills with students. And sometimes, well, a lot of times, with vendor products, with curriculum design that focuses more on close reading than it does the suite of skills that are actually here, we create something in the classroom that happens A, with regularity, and B, in a way that perhaps is misinterpreted, and we undermine what we're actually getting to with the understanding of this particular standard and what our responsibilities are in instruction, meaning that the assessment is going to be difficult to get a kid to if we don't understand deeply what the standard is saying. How's that for a test answer?
No, I think you just got an A. If that's how we're going to do it. Are we doing it letter grade or what? You pass. Right. It's pass or fail.
I think we have to renorm the whole thing.
There'll be a follow-up hangout on air about the assessment of Mike. No, that's wonderful.
Mike, that's a very good description of what close reading is and putting it in context. What are the misconceptions? What are the what is close reading not that people think it is? Where are many people going wrong? Whether it's assessments that have been seen so far, curriculum publishers, teachers, administrators, professional development professionals. What are people missing?
Oh, we just lost him. The signal was not very good there. He'll come back in, I think, and there he is.
There he goes.
Okay.
Hey, Mike, did you get my question on that?
No, if the screen froze, and I heard you start to talk, but we all went out, so I'm back.
Okay. Okay, technical difficulties. Well, I was saying you've done a great job of telling us what close reading is, but that sort of implies that there are probably a lot of people who have misconceptions about it, either assessment developers, curriculum developers, people within the school institutions themselves, teachers, administrators, chief academic officers. There must be sort of a sort of whole pool of misconceptions, but what do you think are some of the major ones, or some of the ones that of doing a successful interpretation of what the standard is calling for?
One of the big things is to not tell kids that they need to closely read something. This comes up on the assessments all the time here in my state in New York and in other states that are starting their own Common Core testing. Part of the directions will say, closely read the following text. If a teacher has only shared that with the kids, we are going to read closely today, but not invited the kids into the understanding of the suite of skills that are in that close reading standards, the kids may have a variable degree of understanding about what close reading is and might not do things like reread the text, look for textual details to support their thinking, not be able to answer questions that have distractors that are related to both external and internal evidence from the text, which means they didn't really close read it. They made an interpretation based on their background knowledge or experiences that have happened to them before. And so kids need to know that, and part of the problem too is the timing of tests. When we do the Common Core testing around our country, one of the biggest issues is endurance and having to read and read and read and read and read and answer these questions and demonstrate our learning, in over the course of a couple of hours. And so there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of time, and there's also a lot of kids sitting on their hind ends, and your hind end kind of determines how much your brain is going to work.
That gives a whole new meaning to building a strong educational foundation.
That's right.
So, underneath all of this talk of standards and assessment and strategies, what we all really want is for kids to love reading and be good at it. So would you say that you have any advice about what parents or teachers could do to, what makes a kid a good reader? What are they doing?
Opportunities to read. The research is pretty clear about how we get kids to read better, and that's they need to read. And that research is from Richard Allington's stuff, Fontes and Pinnell, Lucy Calkins. They all talk about the nature of developing good reading habits. And it's like running a marathon, and this is very popular right now. Everybody's participating in half marathons and full marathons and 10Ks, and running's really popular, but you don't just decide that you're going to be a good runner. You've got to run. And if you don't run, you won't be able to perform. Reading works the exact same way. We can't just do all these tricks and tips and strategies and expect readers to be good readers, expect good reading to happen without the kids reading. And that reading has to be at an instructional level. It can't always be about the challenge and the depth that the Common Core is asking for. The Common Core is asking for that, but it also can be with prompting and support. If you want to do more challenging text, that should be negotiated with a team, the teacher and the students, and not just the students alone, because they may not be accessing what you think they're accessing in terms of building content knowledge and comprehension of the text. That instructional level is really important. The amount that they read is really important. And there are things that we're losing in the classroom because we only have so much time to cover what we've got to get through. The Common Core is about depth. It's not about coverage. And that depth is going to come from lots of practice, which is going to give us the endurance that we need to help the kids perform on whatever test is thrown at them.
That's great. So we don't want to turn kids off reading by everlasting them, make them just dissect everything. It's like, right. In science, you don't go around everlastingly dissecting everything. That's just one thing, and if you don't like it, you're really never going to like anything connected with it. So how much close reading, and who should be doing it?
Well, the kids should definitely be doing it, and if I was still in the classroom, I would teach the students how to develop their own close readings, which is not being done in the classroom, by and large. I have seen some teachers do it, just to be fair. But I would teach them what the process is, setting a purpose for reading for a particular author's intention, looking for evidence that we've reached that intention or staked a claim and looked for evidence to support that claim. Kids need to know how to design this as well as participate in it. That's what critical thinking is. As far as how often, I can tell you it's not going to be every day, and that is extremely contrary to vendor products and state-created modules and curricula. You can't do it every day, or you're going to kill reading. This is sort of a research type thing. We're going back into the text to reread for a particular purpose and gather evidence to support, our metacognitive thoughts. And if we do it every single day and do it with that level of regularity, it's not going to work anymore. We stop creating mental Velcro with high degrees of regularity and methodology. So it needs to be something that is done occasionally, or that we found out with our own daughter. When all of this stuff started with close reading, we were trying to do close readings of all of her little books that she was bringing home, the Fontes and Pinnell books and the leveled readers. And, she got to where she didn't want to read with us because we were asking her so many questions. But it doesn't mean that I'm not going to ask her a text-dependent question every so often, and I'm not doing a close read. I'm doing a support of that suite of skills. Let's look for evidence that we can cite to support what you think about what this page is telling us, or what the author's intention might be, how it relates to the picture that's on the page. Let's draw a conclusion. Let's make an inference about how the pictures and the words are telling us something. What can we infer about what's coming up in the book? Those questions are more natural, and they don't represent this planned close reading. It's just I've changed the way that I've asked questions so that I'm getting to the depth of the text to support comprehension, but I'm not calling it close reading all the time. Because
let me follow up on that, because it seems to me that, and I'll just make an observation and ask you to respond to it. It seems for both in telling us to do close reading and the, as you say, the suite of skills, for the most part, they keep reading text per se as the touchstone and as the frame of reference. And while they touch on the idea that we should bring in other media, it's not, first of all, it's not emphasized a whole lot, and secondly, even if it were to be, people don't have the same analytical tools. Most teachers who are in service today don't know a whole lot about filmmaking or about the design of apps or games, or for that matter even radio. Most people don't have those cross-media frames of reference, so it kind of defaults to reading. But at the same time, in our culture, probably a relatively small percentage of the information that we ingest as adults, either in the workplace or in university, a relatively small percentage is text only. Usually you're correlating quite a bit of feedback, and for that matter, you have oral communication to deal with. So just an observation, I'm wondering how you respond to that, and how you think we can offer teachers some practical scaffolding maybe to accommodate this reality.
In one of the previous books that I've written, it's a series of books on new literacies, but the very first one in the series is called Leading the New Literacies. And I contributed a chapter for this book, but my colleagues and I were really navigating what literacy in the 21st century means. And one of the things that I wrote about was this continuum of modern literacy practices that has, basic print literacy on one end and the convergence of what I call transmedia on the other end. That transmedia is exactly what you're describing in terms of, art, music, listening and speaking skills, all of these things that kids in the real world are bombarded with until they go to school, and then we're back to the basic print text. We have to teach them how to interact with and integrate those pieces of media, and it demands a multimediating of the instructional practice and the assessments. But we also have an opportunity to perhaps play with the wording of the standard. If the standard says read closely to determine what the text says explicitly, what happens in art? What happens in music? What happens in physical education? What happens in content areas that are not specifically bound to traditional print text? we need to be open to that interpretation of the standard to read something along the lines of view closely to determine what the artwork says explicitly, or listen closely to determine what the music, what you're hearing explicitly in the text. Because there are some explicit things that we can talk about that would, like in music, is it going fast? Is it going slow? Is there, are there dissonant noises in there? And how is that feeding the overall tone of the piece? And where can we go back in there to look at some of the domain-specific vocabulary and some of the symbolic things that would help us make some inferences, draw some conclusions about where the author of this piece, the musician, was going. What was their purpose and intent for doing things the way they did them? I think that's an absolutely huge can of worms to open, and is an essential, imperative thing that we need to be worms in schools.
Yeah. And we know that kids love opening cans of worms.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we should have a worm can opened in the next hangout. We'll
oh
deal
yeah,
with that.
That's a good boing.
Yeah, you can do it, Forrest, not me. I'm not doing that bit. I love that you've touched on vocabulary. We have so many things to talk about, and you wrote a whole book on it, so that proves that's true. One of the things I'd like to touch on is how do other disciplines, how does the physics teacher, the chemistry teacher, the gym teacher teach vocabulary? Because I know they're all responsible now for this sort of thing. What are the practices that you've seen already, in traveling around that are working well for people who've not been trained as a straight literacy teacher, but they're now expected to be one?
Well, one of the things is start thinking about how you identify yourself and what your role is in the classroom. Every single teacher in the building, every single stakeholder in the building is responsible now for literacy, and they should see themselves with that responsibility and this obligation to do what they can to enhance the literacy learning of all students. In terms of vocabulary, I see a lot of good things and I see a lot of bad things. I see a lot of handing out lists on Monday and testing the kids on Friday. That is an archaic practice. Certainly at the lower age levels, some memorization is good to learn some sight words, but beyond that, if they are not authentically using vocabulary practices, if they're only having the kids write the word several times or write a sentence with the word just to be tested on Friday, you're teaching kids that vocabulary is only important on Friday or perhaps late Thursday night. But one of the things that is really making a difference are specific process-oriented approaches, such as Bob Marzano's 6 Steps. There's lots of books out there with multiple approaches. Marilee Springer has a book out about effective Common Core vocabulary. All of these are process-oriented approaches that not only introduce the words in an authentic way, but the kids are responsible for their usage, for differing representations of meaning through multimedia, playing games with the words, being held responsible for the words in not just an assessment situation, but also in their writing, also in their listening and speaking, and everything that they do in terms of classroom practice. And that's what needs to be happening with vocabulary instruction, because I am absolutely convinced, working in all the schools that I work in, that if we all agreed on a particular process-oriented vocabulary approach, we would change everything about education. Outside of the Common Core, outside of what the media is saying, if you give the kids a more powerful vocabulary when they're really young, every single door is open. There's no standing in a hallway with a bunch of locked doors they can't access anymore.
That's right.
Well, let me follow up on that for a second, because I thought that was very interesting, the way you talked about the old Monday vocabulary list tested on Friday, and you mentioned adaptations, if you will, or adjustments that people could make to that kind of disproven practice to bring it up to speed with proven practices and research-based practices. Are there other adaptations or other things where the Common Core and itself, but the research, just good research that seems to be sound and forward-looking. Are there other adaptations? We could take some old practices or old areas that we used to teach in certain ways and adapt them to, because it's hard for teachers just to go from 0 to 60, But if I can say, well, okay, I shouldn't do the old vocabulary test, but I should use that list of words, but I should, all through the week weave those words authentically into the experience the kids are having. Maybe assess it, maybe not. But that would be there are other adaptations that people could focus on, get their teeth into.
Certainly, and one of the big ones, and you mentioned it a couple times in what you were saying, is this time limitations on when learning happens. Vocabulary instruction is not going to happen because we want it to during the course of the week. It's going to happen when if we want learning to be fixed, then the time that we have to teach and the content that we're teaching, the vocabulary words that we teach, sometimes have to be variable. And that's kind of the formula for getting learning into kids' heads, creating mental Velcro. It's from a book that I read called Pyramid Response to Intervention. And it really resonated with me because how often is the content fixed and the time is fixed in which to teach the content, and then the learning is variable. The equation works both ways. And so in terms of academic vocabulary, when we look at variabilities in teaching or really enhancing vocabulary instruction, I want to start thinking about what it is the students' responsibilities are here. Are they using their new vocabulary words ubiquitously? Are they being held accountable for that level of usage? Are they maybe taking some risks, applying more complex words in their speaking and in their writing, and being able to make mistakes and it be all right, and be able to articulate why they used a particular word? We do this with my 7-year-old here at home. Sometimes she hears us say words and then she uses them incorrectly, and it becomes a coaching opportunity and not necessarily just a brand new teaching opportunity, because she owns the word. She doesn't own the transfer yet of what the definition means. We want kids to have a toolbox of both academic and domain-specific vocabulary, like the Common Core is calling for, and be able to articulate their reasoning behind the word choices that they make, whether or not the diction is appropriate for the task or the purpose or the audience, which means all of those responsibilities that a kid would potentially have, the teacher simply needs to support. So it becomes more of an authentic situation and not just about the list.
Yeah. Right. Did you see the Apparently kid? Have you seen the video of the Apparently kid, Mike?
It's hilarious.
It's hilarious. And if I were a teacher, I'd be bringing that in and using it to teach the word apparently. I just think that's so much fun. Anyway,
on Ellen's show and used the word quite a bit more. It was great.
I know. And his new favorite is seriously. He's fantastic, that kid. Well, of course, the time is out. I want to just see if we can sum up here with racing through a little thing we call Final Five. Let me see if I can bring up. Nope. Trying to be all fancy here, Mike. Hang on.
Annabelle's doing critical thinking about Google technology right now.
And how useful mistakes are. I love them myself. No. Yeah, no, I do. Hang on. All right. I'm not going to do it. So that's all right. I make mistakes. That's my message today, and I survive. It's quite all right.
Well, it's the overlay, I think.
I know.
Overlay, right?
Yeah, I know, but I've got 2 overlays, and I'm choosing the other one, but it. Okay, I'll
maybe you have to turn off your lower third.
All right. Here we go. I don't care. It was an add-on. It was an add-on to impress you, Mike. So that didn't work, did it? But let's just go ahead with the final 5 questions, which I've stolen from the first 2 from Actors Studio, which is a favorite show of mine. I love the way he interviews. So the first question is, what's your favorite word in education?
Oh, it's not necessarily in education. Well, I guess it could be. I learned it whenever I was in college. My undergraduate degree is in biology, and it's the 2-word Latin binomial name for fruit flies, and the word is Drosophila melanogaster. I just like the way it fills up your mouth. It's a very rich word. It's multi like vivaporous. Like I don't know. I just like big fancy words. I'm not a lexiphanicist though. I'm not pretentious about it. I just like saying.
I think I'll make a prediction right now that we could do 200 of these Common Core conversations, and no one else is going to pick that as their favorite word.
Yeah, I think it's all yours, Mike.
I've got the 7-year-old saying it almost correctly, and even my wife, who is not into science whatsoever, will occasionally say, "There's a Drosophila melanogaster in the house. You need to kill it."
That's fantastic. All right, next question. What's your least favorite word?
My least favorite word is a little more simple, and it's just the word cannot. I don't like hearing it. I don't like unwillingness to try new things. And I don't like people believing in a negative start to anything. And so I think cannot is always the wrong word to use.
Great. Okay. And if you could give one piece of advice to teachers or students right now in this Common Core climate, what would it be?
Honor your expertise. Somebody that's coming in from the outside doesn't know how you prepared to become a teacher. They don't know your children. You've got to focus on what's best for kids and make strategic decisions based on your knowledge of your students, your knowledge of how you prepared to become a teacher. And these vendors don't know your kids, and their interpretations of your professional practice should be peripheral to your own interpretation.
Okay. And what advice would you give to educators and administrators who are not in the classroom, but they're obviously there in the school and having an effect?
I would also add to that other people who have a professional role in education, policymakers, as well as administrators and that sort of thing.
For one thing, there should be no isolated decisions anymore. If we're going to require students to communicate and collaborate and creatively solve problems, they need to be modeling that. So all of these stakeholders, teachers, students, parents even, need to work with these other folks, administrators, people outside of the classroom, and look for opportunities to collaborate and communicate with each other and make really good, informed decisions about how we educate these modern students.
Yeah, collaboration is not an option anymore, is it? We've really got to be doing it, and we've got to be modeling it for the kids, which can be hard when you're one teacher in a room.
Yeah.
To model. That's why I love Hangouts. I'm a big fan of bringing Hangouts into the classroom because teachers are seeing, kids are seeing their teacher collaborate with other teachers in the school. We did one last week, and about 3 classes came in together, and they overhear the tone and the way teachers speak with each other as they cooperate, and then how they cooperated with me when things didn't go well, and then they heard me talk with the author, and you don't usually get that kind of thing if you're just one adult in a room. So I do think Google Hangouts bring a lot of tools and value to a classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Let me jump in and ask question number 5.
Yep, yeah. You go.
Well, the last question number 5, Mike, is what's your best piece of advice for parents, the public at large, the media, people who don't have a professional role in education? They're not in the classroom, but obviously education affects everybody.
My answer to this is mainly geared towards parents, but I think it really is geared toward this community. It takes a village sort of mentality, and that is promote reading. Read with your kids. Read as much as and often as you can. Let them read to you. Explore texts with them at home, and it's not formal whatsoever. I'm talking about reading the backs of a cracker box. I'm talking about reading literacy, like brand literacy, out when you're in the grocery store. Read everything you can, and especially when the kids are young, and it's hard not to get emotional about this because I want my child to continue reading with me, but enjoy this time. You're never going to get it back. When they're young and they're building this foundation for high levels of comprehension and critical thinking and vocabulary acquisition, they're only going to get it if they are good readers when they're young. And if we build those roadblocks as they get older, they're going to have to climb over that roadblock to access the text, and we don't ever want that to happen. And the only way to keep it from happening is to read, read, read. We need a culture of literacy everywhere these kids go.
Yeah, yeah, I know. The sad thing is we raise them to be independent, and then they go and turn out to be independent. We hate it. But so I know exactly what you mean. Well, thank you so much, Mike. This has been an amazing conversation for me. I hope for the audience too. I think so. We obviously need to talk some more. Let's keep it going. So, Forrest, do you want to sign off?
Sure. This is Forrest Stone, Annabelle Howard, and Mike Fisher, and that has been a Common Core Conversation.
Thank you.
All right. Let me just do the screen share to... Can you see that?
And one thing we could add here is that, Mike, as a nonprofit, we have taken this mission to get people reading and to get kids reading very seriously. Mm-hmm. You'll see that that middle community that's pictured there, you might want to lock that up on the screen, but lock your screen share up on the screen. But the middle one is called Reading Without Borders, and this is a place where people can come. They can volunteer to read to children through a Google Hangout, so they don't have to leave their desk. And teachers can pick among the volunteers and vet them and screen them, and then arrange to have one-on-one reading experiences between volunteers and children. We think that this can very much help expand the range of reading experiences that teachers are able to provide students, and it brings a certain level of excitement to the job of reading. If you have somebody, let's say, who's an attorney or works in a bank or is a scientist or a professor volunteering their time to come back into the elementary classroom or the high school classroom and contribute their knowledge and their favorite books and their favorite thoughts about reading with children who, oftentimes don't get more than maybe one or two adults in their lives who can really provide that kind of back and forth. So that is one of our efforts that we're making as a nonprofit to support exactly what you're talking about.
That way, and I've watched a couple of them. I'm really impressed with it. That level of globalization is another facet of the Common Core, and really important for preparing kids, like I said, for the right now skills.
Yeah, we're excited. We have people volunteering from almost, I think, 30 countries at this point, and I haven't counted how many languages, so we're excited. Anyway, we're going to end right now, and thank you, everybody, especially Mike.
All right.